let me start here before I get into what I think is coming, and this is a good indication of it. Last night at the Israeli embassy, 2 staff members, they're called diplomats because they were probably on a diplomatic passport. They worked at the embassy, but these are just two young kids, in their 20s. Yaron Lichinsky and Sarah Milgram. They were walking out of an event that happened to be at the Capitol Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C., and a 30-year-old guy, we now know is Elias Rodriguez. He's from Chicago. He decided that he was going to kill himself some Jews. And so he stood in waiting with a gun, and he gunned these 2 kids down in cold blood. They caught him. They confiscated the gun. If we had the death penalty, I hope he would get the death penalty, but we don't do that anymore. And he's going to be tried most likely in Washington, D.C., so God only knows what happens to him. But this is a couple that he had just this week, unbeknownst to her, gone out and bought a engagement ring here in America, was going to bring it back home in his pocket to Israel. And when they got back to Israel next week, he was going to propose. Their whole life, any children they would have had, gone. Now, let me tell you who this guy is. We now know that this guy was part of a Marxist pro-Hamas organization. It's Marxist communist. These are the people our schools are churning out. This is ends justify the means. These are the same people that are, the same people that are now helping these judges and pushing these judges and protesting in the streets and causing all kinds of havoc because they think that they should stand up for the rights of murderers and everybody else to stay here in our country. Then you have people like the governor of Minnesota saying that ICE is Trump's modern-day Gestapo. Everything is being ratcheted up. Everything is, you have Fang Fang's boyfriend saying that they've arrested MacGyver, a congresswoman, who was assaulting a police officer, trying to storm the gates of a secure facility for ICE. All she had to do if she wanted oversight was call them, and they would have let her in. But they instead, the mayor who wants to be governor of New Jersey, they came with a bunch of protesters. They protested around the gate. Well, as soon as they opened the gate to let a bus in, the protesters, this congresswoman and the mayor, they all surged at the gate. ICE did their best to stop them. They were assaulted, yada, yada, yada. And now, Nancy Mace just introduced a bill in Congress that said she should be removed from Congress. I think she should. I don't think Congress will do it. That's how sad things are. She should be removed from Congress. She's assaulting police officers. DOJ is now going to prosecute her after the investigation for that. For Father's Day, let your dad know he matters. Get him a gift from American Giant. They make clothing here at home with American cotton, American hands, and American heart. It's quality you can feel. Go to american-giant.com/Glenn and get 20% off your first purchase. That's american-giant.com/Glenn. Why? Last night on TV, I asked the question, why would the Democrats be going this way? Why would they be standing up for murderers? Why would they be standing up for Hamas? Why would they be ratcheting up? It's not the way to win an election. You're not going to win on that. America's not going to embrace that. I believe that may not be the plan. Revolution and direct action stuff, that's what they're trained to do. It's the highest calling of the left. And this isn't about politics. This is about a Marxist worldview that has been baked into the minds of several generations of Americans through our university classrooms now. I could give you the the history of it, but I mean, it starts with John Dewey, and then it goes to a guy named Paulo. I think his name is Freire, and Freire he wrote a book called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and that is the sacred text for the left and the educational revolution. You want to know what happened to our education? Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Read it. He didn't see schools as a place for learning math or history. He saw them as battlegrounds for social action. All across the U.S., his critical pedagogy is still the dominant theory in teacher education programs today. So they are churning out radicals. And his big idea was, see if this sounds familiar, the world is divided into oppressors and the oppressed. So the classroom is where you train students to see everything through that lens. You're either the oppressor or the oppressed. This is critical race theory, gender ideology, DEI, every other oppressed versus oppressor framework that's taken over our corporations and our campuses comes from this. The wake of the Hamas attack in Israel, October 7th, 23. Jonathan Haidt, one of the brilliant minds of our day, he wrote an article called Why Anti-Semitism Sprouted So Quickly on Campus. He says the students have learned now a new morality. Let me read this to you. To view everyone as either an oppressor or a victim, students were taught to use identity as the primary lens through which everything is to be understood. Not in their coursework, but in their personal and political lives. When students are taught to use a single lens for everything, their education is harming them rather than improving their ability to think critically. This is the new morality. This is what has driven our universities off a cliff, and it's about to run our country off a cliff if more people don't wake up. Because this is what fuels the direct action in the streets. Now, I said last hour, and I said last night on TV, that I don't know if it's going to be this summer, but we are headed for real, BLM riots all across America on multiple fronts. It's coming. It's just coming. And it's coming from, we've seen the political violence from the left. No matter what the mainstream media wants to tell you, oh, no, that's, we're worried about the white man and the extremists. Well, you know what? I'm worried about everybody right now, quite honestly, but one side really has a track record, and I don't have to go back in the time machine to see it. Let me just give you a few. This is just off the top, of our heads as we sat around this morning. Ready? Baseball field attack on Republican congressman in 2017 by a Bernie Sanders supporter that almost killed Representative Steve Scalise. He was out to kill all of the Republicans on the baseball diamond, and we now know that our DOJ covered it up. Because who is in charge? 2020 BLM riots, which caused at least a dozen deaths and an all-time U.S. record of $2 billion in damages. The 2020 Antifa riots in Portland, where the Department of Homeland Security spent $12 million just to protect the federal buildings during weeks-long battle with rioters. At one point, the rioters barricaded federal offices inside a courthouse and tried to set the building on fire. How about the 96 different crisis pregnancy centers that were attacked since the Dobbs decision was overturned, or overturned Roe versus Wade, or the hundreds of Catholic churches that have been vandalized with pro-abortion messages, or the man who was arrested with weapons, all kinds of stuff, outside Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh's house, who claimed he was there to assassinate Kavanaugh because of the Dobbs decision. Then there was the assassination of the UnitedHeahthcare CEO, Brian Thompson, last year. The alleged killer held left-wing views, and now the left has lionized him. He's a hero of the left. You don't put that man up as a hero for your movement. You don't make him a hero unless you agree with violence, unless you believe no matter what, ends justify the means. He's now a folk hero. How about the burning of the Tesla dealerships and the cars? Last month, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's official residence was firebombed. The suspect allegedly set the governor's mansion on fire because of what? Because Shapiro, who is Jewish, what he wants to do to the Palestinian people. Okay, wait a minute. So shooting last night, the fire there, Then, of course, there was the assassination attempt on Donald Trump's life last year. Somehow we still don't know the details about the assassin's political views, but seems pretty unlikely that he was a conservative. The pattern is very clear. And what's disturbing about this is it's getting worse after the election. Okay? When these people talk about democracy, what they mean is communist-style people's revolution. And I want to make sure you understand this. I'm not talking about the average Democrat that is your neighbor. I don't believe they believe this stuff. I think they've been duped into believing that, through the hatred of Donald Trump, and they may have legitimate reasons for not liking Donald Trump, okay? I'm not going to argue with that. You might have legitimate reasons for not liking him. But they have been so indoctrinated by the mainstream media. They've only been given half of the story, and the half that they're giving a lot of times is out and out lies. I mean, let's talk about the Biden stuff, okay? And you've been indoctrinated to hate Donald Trump, which stops you from looking at what your side is actually doing and the coordination of it. And if you think that it's not coordination, well, let me just tell you about the coalition of Democratic governors called Governors Safeguarding Democracy. It is a group that is led by J.B. Pritzker, who is the Illinois governor, and Colorado's governor, Jared Polis. This is a coordinated effort to defy President Trump's immigration policies and to get some heavy hitters calling the shots. One day after Trump's second inauguration, the group held a Zoom meeting led by none other than Norm Eisen. Who is that? He's the former White House ethics czar, so funny, and a special counsel for Trump's first impeachment trial. He is also one of the ringleaders of the current lawsuit campaign. He's laid this whole thing out. Now, their strategy is laid out in a book called Governors Safeguarding Democracy, Firewall for Freedom. Now, it was obtained through FOIA by the Daily Signal. Why isn't nobody talking? Why isn't anybody saying, thank you, Daily Signal? Why isn't anybody talking about this? Well, we know, because the mainstream media is never going to talk about this. The plan includes model executive orders for governors to use in blocking National Guard deployments if they don't like them, and refuse state resources for federal immigration enforcement. One draft order says that states shall provide no time, money, or facilities for National Guard units deployed without the governor's approval. Another directs state agencies to withhold information if they suspect it's being used for immigration actions. So they are plotting government. And what exactly are they preparing to obstruct? What National Guard deployments? What are you talking about? Well, Governor Pritzker said something in a speech that I think ties into this directly. Is it just that they're going to use legal action? No. Now, remember, Pritzker is one of the guys leading this with Norm Eisen and everybody else. And I want you to listen to what he's saying. He's not talking about the National Guard, and he's not talking about lawyers here. Listen to what he said just a couple of weeks ago.
Never before in my life have I called for mass protests, for mobilization, for disruption. But I am now.
These people cannot know a moment of peace. That is a governor of one of our largest states. This is what happens when the system churns out activists instead of thinkers. Violence is excused as resistance. When governors weaponize their authority to defy the will of the American people. Trump won in a clear 2024 mandate. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows Trump was elected for two things. The economy and immigration. And I don't think in that order. But he won. And the left is obsessed with their oppressor-oppressed worldview. They see only one path, and that is fight, disrupt, and resist. We're not talking about just policy disagreements. This is a coordinated effort to destabilize America, rooted in decades of Marxist indoctrination. That's what's happening in America. That's what's coming.